we really have left off here, right? And the nice thing is the re-topo mesh is already available. Of course, you can hit 4 to go to object mode, and you can go back to other stuff to work on it, right? If you need to work on this some more, you can. It is an object, so you can select it again. And you see retopo mesh is on. You'll notice, though, when you go to retopo mesh and you're in object mode, it has the start retopo available again. So if you hit 4 to go to object mode, you can go in and actually build up a whole different retopo part of armor, right? So if you want to do some retopoing for like a gear or something else like that, you can for other parts of the model. But if you want to continue with the retopologies you're doing, you do have to go into an edit mode, like say 2 for edge mode. And then you'll see these come up, right? You'll notice that your shrink wrap is already available. It's already using the quad body. I always just go up to the reference object just to make sure it's knowing to use the quad body again. I always stick with the retopo mesh because this tends to work best with the retopo mesh label. So when you create new stuff, it kind of will create this. And then when you want to continue working, you can join them. We haven't needed it here, but we will need that trick here. So we'll kind of start to see that later this week and maybe a little bit into next week as well. We're really kind of in that phase of just trying to finish the model up in the next couple weeks. That way we can UV wrap it, then spend some time sculpting and painting it. All right. So we do want to select the retopo mesh that it has kind of labeled for us, right? And just go into like edge mode, 2 for edge mode, 3 for face mode, whatever. But edge is usually pretty good because we're going to use that more often than not. And just make sure to tell your reference body to be reference object to be the quad body, right? That's what we're drawing this on top of. So your reference is whatever you're drawing the topo, the geometry on another surface, right? Because that's what we're doing, is we're drawing this on another surface. That's what the shrink wrap is allowing us to do. It sticks to the surface, right? So just keep that stuff in mind for how we're working, right? Of course, if we want, we could do some more drawing. We'll make sure to kind of have our tweak tool on. If you wanted to use your annotate brush, of course, you could do that, right? You might find that you want to do that some more still for some other stuff. It really is kind of up to you on how you want to go about it, right? Like we said, it could be one of those things where D is the quick key for it, so it turns it on. And of course, if you hit D, it'll toggle it to line, and then it kind of does another annotation option. And then there's the red line, which is your erase, so if you want to get rid of one. And then D takes it back to the normal one, right? If you hold down left mouse button on this, you see there's annotate, annotate line, annotate polygon. So that kind of draws it more like a curve, but not smooth. It'll be kind of more like linear. And then there's annotate erase. So you have these annotate features, and Blender has them default. And it allows you to kind of draw curves in the viewport for making notes sometimes and things like that. But you can actually leverage it to do other really cool things, which is what Speed Retopo does. And so I could easily just come in here and I could just, once again, like left-click draw a curve in here, right? And if I wanted to, I could do another one there, but I think, well, that's good. But once we've done that, we want to go back to Q, right? Because Q will go back to our selection tool. In this case, I've got it set to tweak. Remember, you can assign those to mouse buttons if you want to. I've got that assigned to mouse buttons 4, and then I think 5 is for the circle select, right? So if I do one mouse button, it does circle select. If I do another mouse button, it does that. If you have more than a 3-button mouse, that works great. But remember, Q toggles through all those types. So just Q turns that tool on, but it also toggles through the type, right? So remember, there are 4 different types. There's marquee select, which is your box. There's lasso, which is doing the same thing, but it's kind of more like you draw a shape. There's circle, which is your kind of drag select, where you kind of just move your brush over something and it selects it. And then there's tweak, which is your ability to single select, but also just tweak move. Once we got that set, we can hit 1 for vertex. And remember, you can select a vertex here, and then a vertex here. And you can go up to select, select linked shortest path, right? Now you see I have a quick key to that, so it selects those. And then what we could do is we could add a B surface between those, right? So, and you can keep drawing those in, but you would draw this one and then another one further out. So the order that you draw them in does matter. You'd want to draw this one first, then another one there, and you want to draw them from the same direction. It does actually take that order, the direction you draw it, and kind of the place you do it into that context as well. So not only can that just allow you to draw a bunch more, but you can connect it to our existing geometry. And once you kind of get those things down, you start to realize, hey, this is actually pretty neat. You notice it does do kind of a flat shading effect on those new ones. That's what recalculate normals will do. It'll just kind of re-smooth shade that. Remember, I like hidden wire to be off so I can see the geometry, and backface culling to be on so I kind of just only see one side of it. So those are always kind of good. And of course, you could just left-click drag that in there. Clipping is on for your mirror. So you see if you just drag that in there, eventually clips it. And then, of course, we go to 2, and I could select an edge, shift, left-click to select another edge, right-click to do bridge edge loops. Of course, I have a quick key set up for it because I use bridge often. So remember, Blender doesn't have default quick keys for everything, right? So if you right-click on something, you'll see that you can assign a shortcut. So Blender's super easy at doing that. So we bridge it, and you see we can just go in here and tweak these a little bit more, right? That's what that shrink wrap's going to allow us to do. Occasionally, if it gets a little weird, I will turn on snap face. That can help sometimes. Most of the time, I feel like snap face gets in the way, so I turn it off. But sometimes it's actually cool. Occasionally, shrink wrap gets weird, right? Like 85% of the time, shrink wraps works great, but occasionally I've noticed it's like it goes wonky a little bit. And that's when I'll use snap to face, right? Remember, that's a magnet, and then, of course, face. By default, this is actually on, though. Right, so when you kind of do your first speed retopo, it sets up a shrink wrap. I tend to like near surface point instead of project, and on surface instead of above, which are kind of its defaults. So I tend to like those, but that's what's cool with shrink wrap, right? You can kind of play around some of these options if you need to. Remember, you can always add in loops still, so you saw that was just clipping was normal, bridging was normal. Alt-C is loop cut, right? Right here, Alt-C is loop cut. And so I can easily add an edge loop in there. And you see how it actually does a good job of conforming to the surface that's underneath it, right? I can go back to my tweak tool if I wanted to, and I can go to vertex, and I can tweak that vertex a little bit, right? You can even go into 2 for edge mode, double left click. Now, if I hit W for move, remember, middle mouse button could view move it, and it sticks to the surface. But you see how it doesn't really move exactly where we want it to? So keep in mind that you can actually right click to bring up your context menu for edges. And remember, there is edge slide, right? And this will actually slide it along the surface. And this also does a good job of following shrink wrap. So I can do it to this one as well. Double left click, right? That's what our quick key quiz from Friday was. How do you select an edge loop? Double left click, right? I can right click edge slide. And you see how even your slide tool follows that? So these are these little things that I want to remind you guys that pretty much all of your normal modeling tools work with this, right? Tweak works with this. Extrude, loop cut, bridge, slide, right? So once you actually understand that speed retopo is really just giving you like an interface for this and making it easier to use annotate to create surfaces, you're realizing that this is really just an interface for what Blender already does. And the guys that put together speed retopo have just made sure to kind of give us a nice interface that makes it easy to get around to these things and automates some of the kind of starting features. But you could still use all of your normal modeling tools for this stuff. So even if you didn't have speed retopo, you could easily just use mirror, shrink wrap, extrude to do this as well. So just kind of remember that, right? Just kind of remember that these features are there. You have them available. And of course, if I wanted to just maybe finish this off, or maybe just do this a little bit differently, right? 2 for edge. I can grab this edge and I could hit Control E for extrude, middle mouse button, E for rotate, middle mouse button. Because remember, middle mouse, if you hold down middle mouse button drag, it usually is what's actually going to default kind of do the main feature for the tool that you're using, right? You can always grab specifically on that yellow handle that pops up for certain tools, and that'll give it a different behavior. But also, it's just your view rotate and your view move. So I can do another Control E, middle mouse, and I can just kind of move it in there and it clips, right? Q for my regular selection tool, and I could always go to vertex to just tweak the vertex a little bit. Maybe 2 for edge to bring that in a little bit there. And if I wanted to, Alt-C for loop cut, right? We could put a little edge loop in there. Q for a tweak, and I could just kind of tweak that out a little bit there. And I can just go back to E for rotate, middle mouse button. You see you can actually kind of rotate these, and it actually sticks to the surface still. R for scale, middle mouse button. So move, rotate, and scale will still follow this, right? So you really have the ability to use those quite effectively. So I can go to here, Control E for extrude, middle mouse button. Control E, and actually I'm not even Control E, I'm just middle mouse button because I'm still in extrude tool. And then another middle mouse button. And then if I want, I can hit Q, and I can kind of just tweak these a little bit, right? Just to maybe one. Let me get back to tweak. Remember, tweak is the one that's kind of the plus with the cursor. And you see how we can quickly and easily, even without doing the B surface stuff, just using our normal modeling tools, we can quickly and effectively get more and more of this retopo out there. Now in this case, I'm just going to maybe hit Alt-C for loop cut just to put a loop in there, maybe one more there. Q for my regular tweak tool, bring that in a little bit. There we go. And you see how those stick to the surface pretty well, so we can just kind of go in here and make minor little adjustments really quick. Maybe one for vertex mode again, just to tweak that vertex a little bit. Go back to 2 for edge. And you see we can easily just kind of add that little bit there. And then, of course, I could go here and I could select that edge. And tweak tool, remember, works as a selection tool. So I can kind of select maybe 3 edges there. And then I could go down here and I could select 3 edges. And then we could, of course, right-click, bridge edges. And then if I want to add a little bit more in here, and I might even just tweak those edges a little bit more just to kind of maybe line it up a little more. Alt-C for loop cut, right? And I can put an edge loop in there and there. And you see how that stuff is following the surface? And remember, you can even use your sculpting tools. 5, remember, is your quick key for sculpt. And it goes back to what the default I was using before, which is grab. And I can always move those things a little bit. And I can hold down Shift to smooth a little bit. So if you want to do a little bit of shape adjustment here, but also soften up areas so they kind of spread more evenly, you can actually use that. So your sculpting tools are fully available to you to work with for adjusting these things. It's pretty cool, right? Remember, 5 is your quick key for sculpt mode, right? Right there. And you can see how once you really get to know Speed Retopo, you have a pretty awesome tool set. And here I'm actually going to leave some gaps because hey, it doesn't have to be exactly perfectly covered everywhere. You know, you can have little bits and parts open as the design you see fit for. But you see how we can actually follow and create unique edge loops like this that don't follow the geometry that's underneath? That's the real power of retopologizing, right? Is you can rebuild parts of models that don't follow the normal edge loops, right? That's why the areas that weren't going to be as easy to box model, we're going to save for retopo. But that also applies to gear. So many of these edge loops do not follow the body edge loops, right? And that's fine because the body edge loops are there before the structure of how legs will move, right? This is meant to be its own gear and armor, so these edge loops follow the contour you want to create, right? So remember, that's one of the things is these loops should follow the contours of the surface you're trying to create. For a character creature, particularly if it's like arms, legs, fingers, and toes, it's pretty linear. Just extruding out will basically take care of that for you. You saw even extrusions or insets for the eye and the mouth work great because they create that nice radial pattern for us. But we see that certain parts like this and this kind of follow their own edge flow, right? There's kind of a muscle and bone structure here that flows this way. And that even applies for gear. It's kind of like our car. Remember how we kind of made sure to extrude and bridge border edges for our car to kind of make sure that they follow the loop flow? And that's the biggest thing, is you want your models to look good in low resolution. We're using subdivisional surfaces just to get us there quicker and easier while still having something pretty efficient because we keep them relatively simple, right? We're not trying to add in every little edge loop. And you want the edge loops to follow the contours of whatever you're building, right? Characters and creatures, it's muscle and bone, right? For armor and gear, it's whatever you want the contour for the surface to be, right? For cars, it's, you know, kind of how the fender's shaped. The wheel wells kind of have that little arch, kind of horseshoe shape, right? And that applies for here as well. Now, at this point, I really feel like I've done everything I want to for retopo here. So what we could do is we could go to object mode 4, and I'm just going to apply all. And now you'll see that the shrink wrap and the mirror have been applied. And if I want, I could actually just fully combine this with something else, right? Or I could rename it. Double left click, and we can call this quad gear, right? And now we have full geometry available for us, right? If I want to, I could solidify this right now, and I could apply some other stuff to it if I wanted to also. It's kind of up to you on how far you want to push it, how detailed you want it. But in this case, we could apply the solidify modifier, or we could just go to 3 for face mode, select the face, select linked, right? Remember, select linked is right here. I've set it spacebar because I think the right bracket's kind of too far over for something I use all the time, whereas spacebar is a great quickie for that. Remember, there is an actual solidify modifier, so if you want to use that as a modifier, you can. I tend to like to do it to the faces. So in the face menu, you will see solidify faces. It's one of the few Blender features that the right click actually doesn't really show up in there, right? It is one of those slightly weird things. You're like, why is that not showing up on there? Most of the time, that's not going to be a problem. Occasionally, you will not find a tool in the right-click context menu, right? It's just kind of one of those things. I could also turn the quad body off as the reference object and go back to edit, right? So that way you don't have to worry about that stuff. But we can go to face, and we could solidify faces. And remember, that does bring up the options down here, right? Solidify, so we open that up. And we could just kind of left-click, drag, slide to kind of get those faces. There we go. Kind of brings them out. And since there's no mirror modifier, this will solidify it all properly for us. So that gives us thickness, right? Now you'll notice those look inside out. So I'll select the face, select linked. Remember, loop tools, mesh tools, utility tools will have flip normals there. So you can flip those polygons back outward. They also are, though, in mesh normals flip, right? I just like kind of having them there. You can, of course, any of these add-ons, you can assign quickies to, right? Click, assign shortcut, right? So you do want to make sure to flip those. Also, you notice how we could kind of still see through the armor through it, right? So if I go to object mode, select that, I can go back to, trying to remember where that's at. Should be, which one is it? There we go. The little orange one, we can go to viewport display, right? So if you go to the little orange square right above the blue wrench for our modifiers, viewport display, right? You'll see in here you could turn wireframe off, and you can turn off in front. So it starts to behave itself like normal again. So that's one of the cool things that Speed Retopo does for you as well, is it kind of turns a few of those things on. That's what those little, those kind of these right here, that's what those are doing, right? So that's why this is cool, right? It's not really doing anything that Blender already doesn't do. It's just building a proper interface for them, and it's a nice interface. It's cool. Everything's right there. That's why I like it a lot, right? BPainter kind of does the same thing. Blender kind of does all that stuff, and it just builds a proper interface to make layer painting and channel painting a lot easier, right? That one's not free, though, but it is awesome. And now you see we've got armor for this character, right? So, kind of cool. I figure that's probably a great place to stop for today on that. I'll show you a little more on the armor, like using inset and extrude to kind of create a little more forms, but I figure we'll do that tomorrow before we start building this guy up. So that'll be a great place to stop, but now you see we've got some armor for our creature character, and it's kind of a cool way to introduce you to retopologizing without having to rebuild part of a character yet, right? It's a good kind of introduction to it, gets you starting to use Speed Retopo, and it also shows you retopologizing is great not just for rebuilding characters or parts of characters. There's all these other uses for it. So retopologizing tools are actually awesome. It's one of the cool things in the last several years that's come about that's a great new tool in our arsenal of tools to build stuff. And some nice little extra things, like the little kind of orange guy, right? It's your object properties, just like that's your modifier properties. And you can go to the viewport display for that object. And it is on a per object basis, right? So I figured it's kind of cool to get you guys to see that a little bit. And we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow in tomorrow's lecture. All right, so we'll end that.